We're on the Wirral Peninsula at Ness. Now, Ness Gardens doesn't have a loch or a monster. What it does have is one of Britain's best plant collections. Now owned by Liverpool University and designed as much for academic learning and research as for public delight, the gardens were designed by Arthur Kilpin Bulley. Cotton magnate, Fabian socialist and philanthropist, Bulley was also possibly our greatest plant collector. By tracking down new species, seeing if they could grow in this country, and then making them available to the ordinary gardener in seed form, Bulley, more than anyone, changed the face of gardens throughout the land. His daughter Lois, who donated Ness Gardens to Liverpool University, recalls the start.
He and my mother used to go for holidays in Europe, and it struck him that you could get the same plants at sea level in Norway, that you could get at 2,000 feet in the Alps. And that suddenly raised the thought that if that is so, then other mountains, particularly the Himalayas, may well have a belt of flowers, plants, which will grow in temperate regions.
Was the idea of importing the plants simultaneous?
Well, first he had the happy thought that missionaries grew in strange and unlikely places, and he wrote to ask if they'd collect plants, seeds for him. But many, of course, wouldn't look at it, but some did, and one produced a superb phrase, he'd be pleased to help. He thought flowers were such gems of inoffensive beauty. And before my mother's mind, there leapt the kind of woman who might be called an offensive beauty. Anyway, they did their best, and they sent the seeds home, great excitement, and when they came out, we've had the finest international collection of dandelions that you ever heard of. That nice fluffy head seemed to make a fatal appeal to the missionary mind. So the need for someone was conspicuous, and my father consulted Edinburgh Botanic Garden, and George Forrest was recommended to him, and then things started to happen.
Yes. George Forrest, an adventurous and moody character, was 31 when in 1904 Arthur Bulley sent him off to China. The two men frequently disagreed. Bulley wanted specific plant types brought back, but Forrest wanted the freedom to explore. Despite their rows, despite hair-raising encounters with Chinese rebels, despite loneliness and privation, George Forrest delivered the goods to his patron.
When first they came, of course, they were from Forrest and for my father. Later, when it was this consortium of persons who'd paid for the collector, certainly sometimes they must have come here, because I can remember it, and the exceedingly delicate business of sorting it out rightly among the people who'd contributed.
What happened when everybody had got their allotted plants? What happened to the plants then?
They went with speed and all possible care to the recipients. I think they were chiefly grown for glory.
Talking of that, did your father get his name on a plant at any time?
Several, as well as the famous Primula Bulliana. I've heard my father introduce himself to a plant enthusiast in New Zealand by saying, "I'm Primula Bulliana." "Yes," he said, "I know you are."
What sort of a man was he?
Difficult question to answer, especially one's father. But I think you might say that all his life, a little irregular stream of ideas bubbled out of the top of his head. Sometimes they were poor ideas, and my mother thought them poor, in which case she'd discuss them morning, noon, and night with him, and in 3 days they'd be dead. But if she thought the ideas were good, and a very fair number of times they were. She banked the fires.
I know that one of your father's great ideas was bees' seeds. How did that come into existence?
It started in a couple of seed boxes in my parents' house. He set up the cooperative bees, practically blackmailing his many relations to take a pound share each, and it staggered to its feet. Yeah. And they cycled all over the Wirral looking for somewhere to launch it, and what they were looking for was south-facing slopes, which are quite hard to find. And they eventually found this one. It didn't take bees long to outgrow it.
40 years ago, Lois donated Ness Gardens to the University of Liverpool. The director is Kenneth Hume.
Many people say that it's one of the most beautiful botanic gardens of the British Isles, and I tend to agree with that sort of judgment. We do, in fact, have a responsibility for ornamental grounds that some others don't have. Because of the Bulley bequest, we are committed to have grounds that must be open to the public at all times.
I know that indirectly Bulley was responsible for what? Introducing 500 species into this country. Is there one here at Ness that really sums up that contribution?
Well, I suppose Pieris fulmosa forestii would be the plant that would be indicative of Bulley's work. It was discovered by George Forrest on his first expedition, and we have the first plant to be raised in this country, still growing in the garden here.
Still growing?
We have very large collections of rhododendrons and azaleas, a very good heather garden, a large collection of alpine plants, and I think we can say that we've got the largest collection of named plants in the whole of the north of England.
Does Ness employ as many gardeners now as it did when Arthur Bulley was here?
Not quite the number that it employed at its peak. At the peak period, there were about 17 here, and now we have roughly a dozen people working in the garden.
Can you tell me the story of his creation of a land army in World War I?
Yes, men disappeared. And naturally, he looked round the possible girls that hadn't yet been swept up to the munitions. And I presume it was my mother or other aides that designed a suitable uniform for them. You might say knickers and a longish coat. Yeah. Well, it was considered a very short coat in those days. But women in trousers, let alone not long skirts, was a very new idea there.
Shocking thing.
Yeah. The village turned out to watch them go to work and was heard to say, "Brasnooses." But that was a great success.
Yes. He was a feminist, I think, was he?
Oh, yes. He had 10 large sisters, so he was brought up with plenty of practice.
Tell me about the people that brought you up and educated you here.
When my parents went on holidays, they took themselves to the continent and enjoyed it immensely and thought how much nicer it would have been if they'd been able to speak the local tongues. So when unexpectedly, first I and then my brother landed in, they proceeded to fix us up with a German governess and nursery maid, so that we spoke German as cheerfully as English.
How could he afford to build this fine house and these lovely gardens?
His father had started S.M. Bulley and Son, the cotton business, and all the sons gradually became the senior partners. And presently my father, who was the 13th of a family of 14,
Goodness.
became the senior partner. And that was really his living.
Did he ever leave the business to go out and collect his own plants?
Oh, no. I don't say he wouldn't have picked up something interesting if he'd seen it, but it required too much energy. He wasn't in the first flush of youth then. And going twice, one to see the thing in flower, again to find it and collect seeds. And he said wickedly, "Oh, I'd love to go to places where no one's ever been before and see these things. I'd want to come back to a good hotel in the evening."
Your parents seemed to practice what they preached, didn't they? They were Fabians.
They did their best to, yes, indeed.
Because, tell me about the miners' strike of 26.
My mother fed them. She got up a scheme with the local tradespeople. I don't know how much. I think it was something terrific, like 5 shillings in those days, per household per week. I haven't got the details now. When it was over, my mother totted it up and said she thought that she might have spent on the miners' strike, the feeding, what another woman in her position might have spent on a Rolls-Royce car.
Do you, when you walk around these gardens now, allow yourself to take pride in what your father started?
Great pride and such joy. It's flourishing and going. Oh, I'm so happy.
I think undoubtedly he's the most important patron of plant collecting in the 20th century, of that there's no doubt.
This summer's been rotten, hasn't it? We all went off to the seaside ready to promenade in our shorts or sundresses and ended up trudging around in the rain, muffled up looking like Wurzel Gummidge. Well, we poor scarecrows deserve some fun, so let me present to you the first ever down-to-earth scarecrow competition. All you have to do is to make a scarecrow. Absolutely anyone can enter. Schools, theatre groups, farmers, gardeners, pensioners or policemen, anybody. We then intend to display and judge our scarecrow entries at the Cheshire Ploughing and Hedge Cutting competitions at Warrington on September the 25th. And they'll feature prominently in the film we'll be making with the hedges and the ploughmen. If you wish to enter a scarecrow, either traditional or high-tech, we'll need to know in advance. So drop us a line with your name, address and telephone number to this address. Scarecrows Competition, Down to Earth, Granada Television, Manchester M60 9EA. That's Scarecrows Competition, Down to Earth, Granada Television, Manchester M60 9EA. And I'll tell you how to get your entries to Warrington in the next Down to Earth. That programme will feature 2 of the region's most successful orchid growers, as well as a look at the joys and sorrows of farm tourism on Anglesey. Growing Pains will be back too with a new look. See you in a fortnight. Goodbye.